You've done this before. You're mid-conversation, smiling, nodding, fully present, and then it hits you. You have absolutely no idea what this person's name is. Not even a hint. Not even a first letter. Just a blank space where something important was supposed to stick. And now your brain splits in two. One part stays in the conversation, pretending everything is normal. The other starts scrambling behind the scenes, searching for clues, replaying the moment you met, wondering if maybe, just maybe, you never heard it properly in the first place. So you stall, you avoid using their name, you hope someone else says it. You consider extreme options like checking social media later or just never speaking to them again. It sounds ridiculous, but it's not. Because if you're someone who forgets names easily, you've probably wondered at some point, what's wrong with me? Why can I remember random details from years ago, entire conversations, things people said word for word, but not the one thing I was supposed to remember? And here's the part most people never tell you. Forgetting names isn't a sign that you're careless or rude or bad with people. It's a sign that your brain is doing something very specific, and in many ways, very intelligent. Because the moment you meet someone new, your brain is under pressure. You're reading their face, their tone, their energy. You're calculating how to respond, what to say next, how you're being perceived. You're managing eye contact, body language, timing. You're trying to come across as normal, likable, socially competent. All of that is happening at once, and right in the middle of that mental traffic jam, someone hands you a single, abstract piece of information: their name. The problem is, names are strangely empty. They don't describe the person. They don't carry meaning on their own. They don't connect to anything you already know. They're just sounds, and your brain, which is designed to prioritize meaning, emotion, and relevance, quietly decides that this isn't urgent, so it lets it go. Not because you didn't care, but because in that moment, something else felt more important. This is where it gets interesting. Your memory isn't a recording device. It doesn't store everything equally. It filters. It compresses. It keeps what feels meaningful and discards what doesn't. That's why you can remember the exact tone of someone's voice, the way they laughed, the feeling you had talking to them, but not their name. Because your brain didn't store the label, it stored the experience. And if you think about it, that's actually a very human way to remember people. But there's another layer to this that makes it even more personal. People who forget names easily are often not distracted in the way you might assume. They're not disengaged. They're often the opposite. They're deeply in their own heads. While someone is introducing themselves, there's a quiet internal dialogue running in the background. Am I making enough eye contact? Did I interrupt them? Do I seem awkward right now? What should I say next? And that internal voice is loud. Loud enough to override the moment the name is actually spoken. So the name enters briefly and then disappears under the weight of your own thoughts. Not because you didn't hear it, but because your attention was divided. This is something psychologists have observed for decades. When people are anticipating their turn to speak or managing how they're perceived, their ability to remember what was just said drops significantly. In other words, the more self-aware you are in social situations, the less likely you are to retain simple details like names, which creates a strange paradox. The people who care the most about how they come across are often the ones who forget names the fastest. And that's where a lot of the unnecessary guilt comes from. Because forgetting someone's name feels like a social failure. It feels like you didn't value them enough to remember. But that interpretation isn't accurate, because what you probably did remember is everything else. You remember how the conversation felt. You remember what they said about their life. You remember whether you liked them, whether they seemed interesting, whether something about them stood out. Your brain was paying attention, just not to the label. And here's something most people don't consider. Names are often the least meaningful part of a person. They're assigned randomly, before someone has done anything, before you've formed any connection to them. They don't tell you who someone is. They just give you a way to refer to them. So when your brain chooses to prioritize tone, emotion, expressions, and meaning over a random sound, it's not failing, it's selecting. Now, of course, this doesn't mean names don't matter socially. They do. Being remembered feels good. It feels validating. It signals that you were seen. And forgetting someone's name can feel like the opposite, even if that's not what you intended. So there's a tension here. On one side, you have a brain that naturally prioritizes depth over labels. On the other, a social world that expects you to remember those labels anyway. And navigating that gap can feel exhausting. But there's a subtle reframe that changes everything. You don't have a bad memory. You have a selective one. Your brain is optimized for stories, not spreadsheets. It remembers context, not categories. It holds on to what feels alive, not what feels arbitrary. And once you understand that, the shame starts to lose its grip. Because the problem was never that you don't care about people. It's that your attention gets pulled inward at the exact moment you're supposed to store something outward. And that's something you can work with. Not by forcing yourself to try harder in a vague way, but by gently shifting your attention in that one critical moment. When someone tells you their name, pause, actually hear it, repeat it back, give it a second longer than feels natural. Because what you're really doing isn't memorizing a word. You're giving your brain enough time to attach meaning to it, to connect it to a face, a voice, a moment. You're building a bridge. And without that bridge, the name has nowhere to go. But even with that, you'll still forget sometimes. Everyone does. The difference is, now you'll understand why. And more importantly, you'll stop turning it into a judgment about who you are. Because the truth is, people who forget names easily are often the ones who notice everything else. They pick up on subtle shifts in tone. They remember the emotional undercurrent of conversations. They store the details that actually define a person. And in a world where most interactions are shallow and distracted, that kind of attention is rare. So if you've ever walked away from a conversation remembering everything except the name, you weren't absent. You were just focused on the parts that mattered more to you. The name was just the label. And the label was never the most interesting thing about them. If this video resonated with you, share your experience in the comments. Consider liking, subscribing, and turning on the notification bell to explore more about the deeper human patterns shaping our lives. Thank you for watching.